Commander Hyun-woo Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the main window. The lights looked peaceful, but he knew something was very wrong. His communication officer turned to him with worry in her eyes. "Sir, we lost contact with the Veltar Empire 3 days ago. Complete radio silence from all their worlds." Hyun-woo felt his stomach drop. The Veltar were one of the oldest races in the galaxy. They had been talking to other worlds for thousands of years. They never went quiet. "Try again," he ordered. "Use all frequencies." Captain So-young Park stepped forward from her station. She was the ship's expert on alien languages and cultures. Her face was pale. "Commander, it's not just the Veltar. I've been monitoring deep space communications all morning. The Zephyrin Collective stopped transmitting 2 weeks ago. The Morvac hegemony went silent last month. And the Crystalline Syndicate ... She paused. They haven't sent a single message in over 20 days. Hyun-woo sat down hard in his command chair. 4 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had simply stopped talking. These weren't small colonies or new worlds. These were ancient empires that controlled hundreds of star systems each. What about distress signals, emergency beacons, anything? Nothing, sir. It's like they all decided to turn off their radios. At the same time, the bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Hyun-woo had served in the Terran Defense Fleet for 20 years. He had seen wars, disasters, and strange events. But this was different. This felt wrong in a way that made his skin crawl. "Get me Admiral Song on Earth," he said, priority 1. While they waited for the connection, So-young pulled up a star map on the main screen. Red zones marked where the silent civilizations lived. The empty spaces looked like holes in the galaxy. "Sir," said Lieutenant Dan Han from the sensor station, "I'm reading something strange. The areas where these species lived, there's still energy coming from their worlds. Cities are still powered. Ships are still moving in some systems. But no one is talking." "What do you mean no one is talking?" "I mean the energy signatures suggest millions of people are still alive and their technology is working. But they're not sending any messages, not even basic navigation signals that ships used to avoid crashes." Admiral Taemin Song's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired and worried. Behind him, Hyun-woo could see other officers moving quickly around what looked like a crisis center. "Commander Kim, I'm glad you called. How much do you know about the current situation?" 4 major civilizations have gone silent, sir. No communications for weeks. It's worse than that." The Admiral rubbed his face. "We just lost contact with the Harmony Collective 6 hours ago. That makes 5. And we're getting reports that 3 more species have stopped responding to hails." So-young stepped into view of the camera. "Admiral, with respect, this isn't natural. 8 civilizations don't just stop talking at the same time. Something is happening to them." "That's what we're afraid of, Captain Park. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. They want all species to stay in their own space until they figure out what's going on." "What do they think is causing it?" Admiral Song was quiet for a moment. "They won't say, but they're scared. I've never seen the elder species look this frightened." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other. Hyun-woo stood up and walked to the star map. The red zones seemed bigger now, like a disease spreading across the galaxy. "Sir," Yoon said quietly, "there's something else. I've been running deep scans of the affected areas. The life signs are ... strange." "Strange how?" "The people are alive, but their brain activity is almost flat. Like they're all asleep, but their bodies are still moving around." So-young turned pale. "That's impossible. You can't function with flat brain activity." "I know. But that's what the scans show. It's like something turned off the thinking part of their minds but left the basic life functions running." Hyun-woo felt cold. He had fought against many enemies, but this was something else. This was an attack on the mind itself. Over the next few days, more reports came in. The Galactic Council had declared all affected areas as quarantine zones. No ships were allowed in or out. They said it was for safety, but Hyun-woo suspected they were just afraid. The worst part was how the other species reacted. The older civilizations that still had voices in the council seemed more interested in protecting themselves than helping the silent ones. They built barriers around their own space and refused to talk about what might be causing the problem. Humanity was told to stay away from the quarantine zones. The council made it clear that humans, being new to galactic politics, should not get involved in such serious matters. "They're abandoning them," So Young said during one of their evening briefings. "All those people, and the council is just writing them off." "Maybe they know something we don't," suggested Yoon. "Or maybe they're cowards," said Lieutenant Woojin Park from security. "The elder species always talk about how wise and experienced they are. But when something scary happens, they run and hide." Hyun-woo looked at his crew. They were angry, and he understood why. Humans had always believed in helping others, even when it was dangerous. The idea of abandoning entire civilizations felt wrong. "Sir," So Young said carefully, "I've been thinking. Humans are different from the other species. Our brains work differently. Maybe whatever is affecting them won't affect us the same way." "That's a big maybe, Captain." "Yes, sir. But if we're right, we might be the only ones who can help." Han-Woo stared at the star map again. The red zones had grown larger. 3 more civilizations had gone silent while they talked. At this rate, the entire galaxy would be dead within months. "Admiral Song said to stay away from the quarantine zones," Yoon reminded them. "He did, but he also taught us that sometimes orders have to be broken when lives are at stake." Hyun-Woo made his decision. "Plot a course for the nearest Veltar system, stealth approach. If we're going to find out what's happening, we need to see it for ourselves." "Sir, that's direct violation of council orders." "Yes, it is. Anyone who wants to transfer off this ship before we leave can do so." "No questions asked?" He looked around the bridge. No one moved. "All right then, let's go find out what's killing the galaxy." As the ship turned toward Veltar space, So Young pulled him aside. "Hyun-Woo, what if whatever did this to them does it to us too?" He looked at her seriously. "Then at least we'll go down fighting instead of hiding. That's what makes us human." The stars ahead looked the same as always, but Hyun-Woo knew they were flying into something that had already destroyed civilizations older and more powerful than Earth. Whatever was out there had turned the galaxy's greatest minds into empty shells, but humans had always been stubborn. When the universe said no, they usually said yes anyway. Maybe that stubbornness would be enough. Maybe it would have to be. Captain Jin-Ho Lee guided his stealth ship through the darkness between stars. The Shadowhawk was built for missions like this, painted black and covered with sensors that could fool most detection systems. But as they got closer to Veltar space, Lee felt like they were flying into a graveyard. Dr. Yoonji Choi sat at her station, watching the scanner readings with growing confusion. She was Earth's top expert on alien brain patterns, and what she was seeing made no sense. "Captain, I'm picking up life signs from the planets ahead. Millions of them, but something is very wrong." "Wrong how, Doctor?" "The brain activity, it's almost nothing. Like they're all in a deep coma, but the readings show they're standing up and moving around." Lee frowned. "That's impossible." "I know, but I'm running triple checks on all my equipment. The readings are correct." They approached the first Veltar world carefully. It was called Kethera, home to over 50 million Veltar. As they got closer, they could see the cities were still lit up. Ships moved between the planets. Everything looked normal from a distance. "Take us into orbit," Lee ordered. "But keep us hidden." The main screen showed the planet's surface. Huge. Cities stretched across the continents. Vehicles moved along the roads. Spacecraft launched and landed at the spaceports. But there were no radio signals, no communications, no signs that anyone was actually thinking. "It's like watching robots," whispered Ensign Daeho Kim from the pilot station. "Everything is working, but there's no life behind it." Dr. Troy's equipment beeped softly. "Captain, I'm getting more detailed scans now. The Veltar are alive. Their bodies are healthy, but their higher brain functions, they're just gone." What do you mean gone? I mean the parts of the brain that handle thinking, planning, creativity, emotion. They're all shut down. Only the basic survival instincts are working. Lee stared at the planet below. So they're alive, but not really living? Exactly. They can walk, eat, sleep, even operate simple machinery. But they can't think new thoughts or make real decisions? My God, said Lieutenant Sujin Park from Communications. What could do something like that? They spent the next 3 hours scanning the planet. The results were the same everywhere. Millions of Veltar walking around their cities like sleepwalkers. They went to work, operated machines, and maintained their civilization, but none of them were really there anymore. Captain, Dr. Choi said quietly, I'm detecting the same pattern on all the Veltar worlds. Every single person in their empire has been affected. How many people is that? Over 2 billion. The bridge fell silent. 2 billion minds, simply switched off. We need to land and get a closer look, Lee decided. Doctor, prepare your portable scanners. We're going down to the surface. They landed outside one of the smaller cities. The spaceport was active with ships coming and going, but when they tried to contact the control tower, no one answered. The landing systems worked automatically, guiding them to an empty pad. Lee, Dr. Choi, and 2 security officers left the ship. The city looked beautiful in the alien sunlight. The Veltar had always been master builders, and their architecture was famous across the galaxy. But as they walked through the streets, the beauty became horrifying. Veltar citizens walked past them without looking. They moved with purpose, going about their daily routines, but their eyes were empty. When the humans tried to speak to them, they simply walked around them like they were obstacles. It's like they can see us but don't understand what we are, Dr. Choi said, running her scanner over a nearby Veltar. Look at this. The scan shows normal physical health, but the neural activity in the higher brain regions is almost zero. They entered a building that looked like an office. Veltar workers sat at desks, operating computers and moving papers around. But when Lee looked closely, he realized they were doing the same tasks over and over again. The same files were being moved from one pile to another and back again. They're stuck in loops, he realized. They remember how to do their jobs, but they can't understand why they're doing them or how to do anything new. Dr. Choi pulled him aside. Captain, I think I know what happened to them. What? Something attacked their consciousness itself. Not their bodies, not their brains as physical organs, but the part that makes them aware, thinking beings. That's not possible. We always thought it wasn't possible. But we're looking at the proof. Someone or something has a weapon that can target consciousness directly. They returned to the ship with their findings. As they flew toward the next system, Lee called Admiral Song on Earth. Admiral, we've confirmed the worst-case scenario. The Veltar are alive, but their minds have been ... turned off. Song's face on the screen looked grim. All of them? Every single one we've seen. 2 billion people, Captain. They're alive, but not really living. Do you have any idea what could cause this? Dr. Choi leaned into the transmission. Admiral, this is a weapon unlike anything we've ever imagined. It doesn't kill the body. It kills the mind, the soul, whatever you want to call the part that makes someone a thinking being. And you think the same thing happened to all the other silent civilizations? Yes, sir. And based on the pattern we're seeing, it's spreading. After the transmission ended, Lee gathered his crew in the briefing room. They sat in silence for a while, thinking about what they had seen. Who could create a weapon like this? Asked Ensign Kim. Someone who understands consciousness better than we do, Dr. Choi replied. Someone who has studied many different species and learned how to attack the mind directly. But why? Sujin asked. What's the point of leaving people alive but mindless? Lee had been thinking about the same question. Maybe because dead civilizations don't maintain themselves. This way, the cities keep running, the technology keeps working, but there's no resistance, no new ideas. No one trying to fight back. That's horrible. Yes, it is. And according to our scans, it's happening faster now. 3 more species went silent while we were down on that planet. Dr. Troy looked at her datapad. Captain, I've been thinking. Humans are different from most species in the galaxy. Our brains evolve differently. Maybe whatever is doing this won't affect us the same way. That's a big maybe, Doctor. Yes, but it's the only hope we have. If humans are naturally resistant to this weapon, we might be the only ones who can fight it. Lee stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked normal, but he knew that behind many of them, entire civilizations were dying a death worse than physical destruction. Set course for home, he ordered. We need to warn Earth about what's coming. As the Shadowhawk turned toward human space, Lee thought about the empty eyes of the Veltar. Whatever was doing this to them was moving through the galaxy like a plague. But instead of killing bodies, it was killing minds. Humanity had always prided itself on being stubborn and unpredictable. They had survived ice ages, wars, disasters, and their own mistakes. Now they faced something that had destroyed civilizations far older and wiser than theirs, but maybe being young and stubborn would be enough. Maybe the thing that made humans hard to control would also make them hard to break. Lee hoped so, because if Dr. Choi was wrong about human resistance, then Earth would soon join the growing list of silent worlds, and the galaxy would become a place where billions of bodies walked around empty, maintaining a civilization that no one was left to enjoy. Lieutenant Dayun Han was running routine scans when her equipment started showing impossible readings. She called engineer Jun Seo Young over to look at the data. Young, am I reading this right? There's something out there, but it's not quite in normal space. Yang checked the instruments twice. The readings are correct, but I've never seen anything like this. It's like something is there and not there at the same time. Captain Lee heard them talking and came over. What did you find? Sir, there's something near the edge of the system. It's partially in our dimension and partially somewhere else, and it's big. Before Lee could respond, space in front of their ship began to shimmer. The stars bent and twisted, and suddenly a massive shape appeared. It looked like a jellyfish made of light and shadow, easily the size of a small moon. Red alert, Lee ordered, but the creature didn't attack. Instead, a voice spoke directly into their minds. Do not fear, we are the observers. We have watched your investigation with interest. Dayun grabbed her head. The voice is coming from inside my thoughts. We apologize for the intrusion. Physical communication is difficult for us. May we come? Aboard your vessel, there is much you need to understand. Lee looked at his crew. This was the first new contact they had made since the silence began. How do we know you're not responsible for what's happening? Because we have hidden from it for longer than your species has existed. 3 figures materialized on the bridge. They looked almost human, but their skin was pale and seemed to shift between solid and transparent. Their eyes were ancient and sad. I am Keeper Velthan, said the tallest one. We have watched the galaxy for millions of years. We have seen. This happened before. Seen what happened before? Lee demanded. The Great Silence? It comes every 50,000 years like a cosmic tide. It chooses the strongest, most ambitious civilizations and takes away their ability to dream, to hope, to reach for something greater. Dr. Troy stepped forward. You're saying this is natural? Natural, yes, but not random. The silence is intelligent. It feeds on potential, on the energy that drives civilizations to grow and explore and create. When it finds a species that burns too brightly, it consumes that fire and leaves only empty shells behind. Engineer Young shook his head. That's impossible. You can't eat potential. Your science does not yet understand consciousness as a form of energy. But consciousness is what separates a thinking being from a simple machine. The silence has learned to consume that energy directly. Keeper Velthan moved to the window and looked out at the stars. We were once like the Veltar. We built great cities, explored distant worlds, created beautiful art. We reached for the stars with both hands and refused to accept limits. What happened to you? We learned that ambition draws the silence. So we chose to survive by becoming less than we were. We stopped building, stopped exploring, stopped dreaming of anything greater. We became observers instead of participants. Lieutenant Han felt sick. You gave up everything just to survive? Yes, and it has kept us alive for 2 million years. We have watched hundreds of civilizations rise and fall to the silence. The pattern is always the same. Dr. Choi pulled out her scanner. Can I scan you? I want to understand how you're different from the affected species. Velthan nodded. The readings showed brain activity unlike anything Choi had seen before. Large sections of the observers' minds had been deliberately shut down. You lobotomized yourselves, she whispered. We removed our capacity for ambition, for dreaming of more than simple survival. It was the only way to become invisible to the silence. Captain Lee felt anger building in his chest. So you've been hiding while entire civilizations died? You could have warned them. To what end? The silence cannot be fought. It is a force of nature like gravity or entropy. You cannot defeat it, only avoid it, by becoming less than human. By becoming alive instead of extinct. The second observer spoke for the first time. Captain, your species shows all the signs that attract the silence. You refuse to accept limitations. You explore dangerous places because they are dangerous. You fight against odds that should destroy you. The silence has already noticed Earth. How long do we have? Months, perhaps weeks. The pattern is accelerating because humanity's defiance is so strong. You burn brighter than most species, which makes you a priority target. Engineer Yang stepped forward. There has to be another way. Some way to fight back? Velthan looked sad. Many species have tried. The Korthic Empire built weapons that could destroy stars. The silence consumed them in a single day. The Ethereal Collective tried to hide in other dimensions. The silence found them anyway. The machine intelligence called Unity tried to upload all consciousness into digital form. The silence learned to consume digital minds as easily as biological ones. So we should just give up? Accept that humanity will become empty shells like the Veltar? Or you could choose to survive as we have, limit your growth, stop exploring. Be content with what you have. The silence only targets species that reach. Too far. Dr. Choi was studying her scanner readings. Keeper Velthan, there's something strange about your brain patterns. The areas you shut down, they're not completely gone. They're suppressed, but still there. Yes, the capability remains, but we do not use it. What if someone forced you to use it again? What if something made you remember what it felt like to dream? Velthan stepped back in fear. That would be death. The silence would find us immediately. But you would be yourselves again. We would be ourselves for perhaps minutes before becoming empty shells. Captain Lee looked at his crew. He could see the same thought in all their eyes. The observers had survived by choosing to become less than they were. But humans had never been good at accepting less. Keeper Velthan, can you show us how the silence attacks? How does it target consciousness? Why do you wish to know? You cannot defend against it. Maybe not. But humans have a bad habit of trying impossible things. Velthan exchanged looks with the other observers. Very well. But understand that knowledge of the silence makes you more visible to it. Simply knowing how it works will draw its attention faster. We'll take that risk. The observer closed his eyes and projected images into their minds. They saw the silence as it really was, not a creature or a weapon, but a force that existed in the spaces between thoughts. It fed on the quantum energy that powered consciousness, the spark that turned electrical impulses into awareness and dreams. It attacks through quantum consciousness fields, Dr. Choi realized. It creates resonance patterns that disrupt the neural quantum states that generate self-awareness. Yes, and once those patterns are disrupted, they cannot be restored. The capacity for higher thought is lost forever. Lieutenant Han studied the images. But humans, our brains are different. Our neural patterns evolved under different pressures. Different but not immune. The silence has consumed species with many different types of consciousness. It adapts quickly. Engineer Yang was thinking hard. What if we could create interference? Something to disrupt the silence instead of letting it disrupt us? Impossible. It exists partially outside normal spacetime. Your weapons cannot touch it. Our weapons, maybe. But what about our consciousness itself? What if we could turn our minds into weapons? Velthan looked horrified. That way lies madness. And death. Maybe, but at least we die fighting instead of becoming empty shells. Captain Lee made his decision. Keeper Velthan, thank you for the warning. But humanity won't survive by becoming less than human. Then you will not survive at all. Probably not. But we'll make the silence remember that we existed. The observers looked at the humans with something like pity. You are all mad. Yes, Lee said with a smile. We are, and maybe that will be enough. As the observers faded away, Dayun pulled up the scanner data. Captain, I'm reading massive quantum disturbances in the nearby systems. The silence is coming. How long? Days, maybe hours. Lee looked at his crew. They were scared, but none of them suggested running or hiding. That was what made them human. Send a message to Earth. Tell them what we learned. And tell them that if humanity is going to die, we'll die as ourselves. Outside the ship, the stars seemed to flicker, as if something vast and hungry was moving between them. Ambassador Myung Kang walked through the halls of the Galactic Council station feeling like she was in a dream. But it was a bad dream, the kind where everything looked normal but felt completely wrong. The station was huge, built to house representatives from hundreds of different species. But now many of the sections were empty. The silent species no longer sent ambassadors because they no longer had thoughts to share. Security Chief Woojin Park walked beside her, his hand resting on his weapon. Something was making him nervous. And Park was not a man who got nervous easily. Ambassador, I don't like this, he said quietly. The elder species are acting strange. They keep having secret meetings that humans aren't invited to. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to help the affected worlds. Maybe, but I've been listening to their private communications. They're not talking about helping anyone. Kang stopped walking. What are they talking about? Quotas, sacrifices, something about maintaining the balance. Before Kang could ask what he meant, they reached the main council chamber. Inside, representatives from the remaining active species sat in a circle. The mood was tense and fearful. The council leader was a Nephis, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His name was High Curator Zephys, and he had been leading council meetings for over 300 years. Today he looked tired and defeated. Fellow beings, he said in his ancient voice, we face the greatest crisis in galactic history. The great silence has returned, and it grows stronger with each world it claims. Kang raised her hand. High Curator, humanity has been investigating the affected areas. We have information that might help us understand what we're facing. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The Aldery representative spoke up. Ambassador Kang, with respect, humanity is too young to understand the gravity of this situation. My people have seen the evidence. Entire civilizations are being reduced to empty shells. We need to work together to find a solution. High Curator Zephys looked at her with ancient, sad eyes. Ambassador, there are things about the galaxy that your species does not yet understand. Some forces are too great to fight. Are you saying we should just give up? We are saying that survival sometimes requires difficult choices. Kang felt cold. What kind of choices? The Grethak representative leaned forward. His species looked like walking trees, and his voice was like wind through leaves. The silence feeds on potential, on ambition. It targets species that refuse to know their place. So you're blaming the victims? We are stating facts. Species that grow too quickly, that reach too far, that refuse to accept limitations, ... They draw the silence. Park stepped closer to Kang. Something in his body language suggested he was ready for trouble. What are you trying to say? Kang demanded. High Curator Zephys stood up slowly. Ambassador Kang, the elder species have dealt with the silence before. We know how it works. It comes every 50,000 years, and it takes the species that burn too brightly. And you just let it happen? we ensure that it takes the right species. The words hit Kang like a physical blow. The right species? The silence must feed. That is its nature. But we have learned that if we guide its choices, we can ensure our own survival. You're offering up other species as sacrifices. We are maintaining the balance that has kept the galaxy stable for millions of years. Kang looked around the chamber. The faces of the elder species showed no shame, no guilt. This was normal for them. This was how the galaxy had always worked. How many times have you done this? Every cycle. When the silence comes, we identify the species that pose the greatest threat to galactic stability. Usually they are young, aggressive races that have not learned to control their ambitions. Species like humanity. Yes, Park's hand moved too. His weapon around the chamber, other security guards tensed. Everyone could feel the danger in the air. You're planning to sacrifice us, Kang said. The silence has already marked your species. Your people's refusal to accept limitations, their stubborn independence, their habit of interfering in situations they don't understand, all of this makes them a natural target. So you're just going to let it happen. We are going to ensure it happens quickly and cleanly. The silence is already moving toward human space. We will provide it with detailed information about your worlds, your populations, your technology. This will help it complete its work efficiently. Kang felt rage building in her chest. You're not just letting the silence kill us. You're helping it. We are preventing chaos. If humanity continues to resist, the silence will grow stronger and might begin targeting other species as well. This way, it feeds and then returns to its rest for another 50,000 years, and in return it leaves you alone. Yes. The Aldery representative spoke again. Ambassador, you must understand, this is not personal. Every elder species has made the same choice at some point. We all chose survival over heroism. How many species have you fed to this thing? Hundreds, perhaps thousands. It is the price of galactic stability. Park caught Kang's eye and nodded toward the exit. She understood. They needed to leave before this got worse, but as they started to move, the chamber doors sealed shut. Armed guards from various species surrounded them. I'm sorry, Ambassador, High Curator Zephy said, but we cannot allow you to warn your people. They might try to flee, and that would only make the silence's work more difficult. You're prisoners, Kang realized. You are guests who will remain here until the silence completes its cycle. Park moved fast. He hit the nearest guard and grabbed his weapon, then created a barrier between Kang and the council members. Ambassador, stay behind me. Surrender. Humans, the Grethok said. You cannot fight the entire galaxy. Watch us, Park replied. The fight was brief but violent. Park was good, but he was outnumbered 20-1. Still, he managed to clear a path to a side door while Kang activated her emergency transmitter. This is Ambassador Kang to all human vessels, she broadcast. The Galactic Council is not trying to stop the silence. They're helping it. They've been sacrificing younger species to save themselves for millions of years. Humanity is next on their list. The transmission cut off as a guard's weapon knocked her unconscious. Park fell a moment later, overwhelmed by numbers. When they woke up, they were in a detention cell. Through the window, Kang could see space. And in that space she saw something that made her blood freeze. Ships, hundreds of them, all flying toward human space with purpose and speed. They're not just letting the silence find us, she whispered. They're leading it straight to Earth. Park checked his wounds. How long were we unconscious? Long enough for them to send a fleet to guide the silence to our worlds. Did your transmission get through? I don't know, maybe, but even if it did, what can Earth do? The entire galaxy has turned against us. Park sat down beside her. The same thing humans always do when everyone else gives up. What's that? Something crazy. Through the window, the ships continued toward human space. Behind them, space itself seemed to darken, as if something vast and hungry was following in their wake. Kang thought about her home, about the billions of people on Earth who had no idea what was coming for them. The galaxy had decided that humanity was too dangerous to live, too ambitious to be allowed to survive, but humans had always been dangerous. They had always been too ambitious for their own good. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe being too stubborn to die quietly would save them. Or maybe they would all become empty shells walking through dead cities. Either way, she knew that when the end came, humanity would face it as themselves. That was something the elder species could never understand. They had chosen survival over identity so many times that they had forgotten what it meant to be truly alive. Humanity would not make that mistake. Fleet Admiral Insu Kim stood in the war room deep under Earth's surface, staring at the holographic display that showed the approaching threat. Around him, the best minds humanity had to offer worked frantically on what everyone knew was probably an impossible task. Dr. the Jin Cho looked up from her computer terminal. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. Admiral, I think I understand how the silence works. Explain it in simple terms, Doctor. Consciousness isn't just electrical impulses in the brain. There's a quantum component, a field that connects all thinking beings. The silence attacks through that field, disrupting the quantum patterns that create self-awareness. General Dong Hyun Kim, the Admiral's brother and head of Earth's defense forces, leaned over the table. So it's like a virus, but for minds instead of bodies. Exactly, but here's the interesting part. Human consciousness evolved differently than most species. We developed under extreme stress, constant threats, survival situations that should have destroyed us. How does that help us? Dr. Cho pulled up brain scan comparisons on the main screen. Our neural patterns are more chaotic, more resistant to outside interference. Most species have very organized, efficient thought patterns. Humans think like we're always in crisis mode. Because we usually are, the Admiral muttered. Right, and that chaos might be our greatest weapon. If we can amplify it, focus it, we might be able to create interference patterns that disrupt the silence instead of letting it disrupt us. General Kim frowned. You want to turn human stubbornness into a weapon? I want to turn human consciousness itself into a weapon. Every ship, every station, every settlement connected in a network that broadcasts pure human determination at maximum power. That's insane. Yes, it is. But insane is what humans do best. The Admiral looked at the display showing Earth's defenses. They had built everything they could in the weeks since Ambassador Kang's warning. Weapons, shields, evacuation. Ships, but none of it would matter against something that attacked minds directly. How would this consciousness network work? Dr. Cho activated a new display. We install quantum consciousness amplifiers on every human vessel and facility. When the silence attacks, every human in the network focuses on the same thoughts, memories of overcoming impossible odds, feelings of defiance against overwhelming force, the absolute refusal to surrender. And you think that will hurt this thing? I think it will confuse it. The silence expects consciousness to collapse under pressure. Human consciousness gets stronger under pressure. We're going to hit it with pure, concentrated human stubbornness. General. Kim shook his head. The Jin, that's the craziest plan I've ever heard. Do you have a better idea? No. Then crazy it is. Admiral Kim made the decision. Do it. How long do you need? The amplifiers are already being manufactured. We can have the network online in 48 hours. We might not have 48 hours. As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the complex. A communications officer rushed over with a message pad. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the outer colonies. Something is attacking their minds. People are stopping. The Admiral felt his stomach drop. How many colonies? 12 so far. The pattern is moving inward toward Earth. Dr. Cho checked her instruments. The quantum disturbances are massive. The silence is here. How long until it reaches Earth? 3 days, maybe 4. General Kim activated the emergency defense protocols. All ships return to Earth immediately. All colonies begin evacuation procedures. This is not a drill. But even as he gave the orders, more reports came in. Ships in space were going silent. Entire space stations stopped responding to communications. The silence was moving faster than they had expected. It's learning our patterns, Dr. Cho realized. Every human mind it consumes teaches it more about how we think. Then we need to give it something it's never seen before. Admiral Kim opened a channel to every human facility in the solar system. This is Fleet Admiral Kim. By now you all know what we're facing. An ancient force that feeds on consciousness itself. It has destroyed civilizations older and more advanced than ours. He paused, looking at the faces of his staff. The galaxy has decided that humanity is too dangerous to live. They think we're too stubborn, too unwilling to accept our place. They're probably right. But that stubbornness is also our strength. We've never been good at giving up, even when everyone else thinks we should. Today we're going to turn that trait into a weapon. In 24 hours we will activate Project Prometheus. Every human ship, station, and settlement will become part of a consciousness network designed to fight back against the silence. It's never been tried before. It will probably fail. But if it works, we'll prove that some forces in the universe are not unstoppable. We'll show the galaxy that when everything looks hopeless, humans find a way to hope anyway. Prepare yourselves. Remember what makes us human. Remember why we fight when others surrender. Remember that we have never ever known when to quit. The transmission ended. Around the war room, everyone went back to work with renewed purpose. Dr. Cho pulled the Admiral aside. Sir, there's something else. The consciousness network will require every human to participate voluntarily. We can't force people to join their minds together. Will they do it? I don't know. We're asking them to risk their sanity, maybe their lives, on an untested theory. They'll do it. How can you be sure? Admiral Kim smiled grimly. Because they're human. When someone tells us something is impossible, we take it as a personal challenge. Over the next 24 hours, reports continued to come in from the outer systems. The silence was consuming human settlements one by one, moving steadily toward Earth. But with each colony that fell, the resistance seemed to grow stronger in the remaining ones. It's like the human spirit is getting concentrated, Dr. Cho observed. The survivors are becoming more defiant, not less. That's what happens when you corner humans, General Kim said. We get mean. Finally, the moment came. Earth's orbital stations reported massive quantum disturbances approaching. The silence had arrived. All stations, prepare to activate the consciousness network, Admiral Kim ordered. Sir, we're getting responses from every human facility in the system. They're all volunteering to join the network. Even the civilian stations? Especially the civilian stations. They're saying if Earth is going down, they want to go down fighting. Admiral Kim felt pride swell in his chest. That's my species. Activate Project Prometheus. Across human space, quantum consciousness amplifiers came online. Millions of human minds linked together in a network of shared determination. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Instead of the usual chaotic babble of individual thoughts, the network carried a single unified message. No, we will not surrender. We will not be silent. We are human and we do not break. The silence hit the network like a wave hitting a cliff. For a moment, it seemed like the human defiance would be swept away like all the others. Then something unprecedented happened. The wave broke, human consciousness, amplified and focused, created interference patterns that the silence had never encountered. Instead of collapsing under the attack, human minds grew stronger and angrier. It's working, Dr. Cho whispered. The silence is actually recoiling. How long can we maintain this? I don't know. No one has ever tried to weaponize stubbornness before. Through the network, every human could feel the battle raging in the quantum realm. It was a war fought with thoughts and willpower, determination, against despair. And for the first time in 50,000 years, the silence was losing. Captain Junyoung Bae felt the crushing weight hit his mind like a sledgehammer. Around him, his crew members began to slow down, their eyes growing distant and empty. The silence had found them, but instead of giving in, Bae grabbed the ship's communication system and began to speak. This is Captain Bay of the Defiant. If you can hear this, remember who you are. Remember why you fight? We are human, and humans do not surrender." His words seemed to cut through the mental fog affecting his crew. One by one, they straightened up and returned to their posts. Commander Hai-1 Kim was running Proxima Station when the attack began. She watched in horror as her staff began to fall silent, their minds shutting down under the silence's influence. But Kim had grown up in the slums of Neosol, where giving up meant dying. "All hands, this is Commander Kim," she announced over the station's communication system. "I don't care what's happening to your minds. I don't care how hopeless this feels, we are not going quietly." She began reading names from the station's memorial wall. Names of people who had died building the station, exploring space, pushing humanity's boundaries. With each name, more of her crew fought back against the mental paralysis. "Remember Chang Wei, who died building our solar collectors. Remember Lisa Santos, who sacrificed herself to save a colony ship. Remember every human who ever said no when the universe tried to break them." Across human space, similar scenes played out. The silence pressed down on human minds, trying to crush their will to resist. But instead of breaking, humans got angry. Pilot Seok-jin Park was flying a supply run to the outer colonies when his squadron was caught by the silence's advance wave. He watched his wingmen go silent one by one, their ships beginning to drift as their pilots lost the will to fly. "Not today," Park muttered. He opened a channel to broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Seok-jin Park, son of a miner, grandson of a refugee, great-grandson of a war survivor. My family has been saying no to impossible odds for 5 generations. I'm not breaking that tradition now." He began sharing memories over the radio, his grandfather hiding from enemy soldiers, his grandmother growing food in bombed-out soil, his father working 18-hour days in the mines to feed his family. "We come from people who survived everything the universe could throw at them. Ice ages, wars, disasters, our own stupidity. And we're still here. Something amazing happened." As Park shared his memories of human resilience, the other pilots began to wake up. Their ships stopped drifting and resumed formation. "That's right," came a voice over the radio. "We're the species that looked at fire and decided to steal it. We're the ones who saw the ocean and built boats. We looked at the sky and figured out how to fly." More voices joined in. Stories of human stubbornness, human refusal to accept defeat. Each story seemed to push back against the silence's influence. Dr. The Jin Cho, monitoring the battle from Earth, watched her instruments in amazement. "The consciousness network is working better than we hoped. Human emotions are creating interference patterns that disrupt the silence's attack." But the silence was learning. It began to adapt, finding new ways to attack human minds. The pressure increased, and some humans began to fall silent despite their resistance. That's when the unexpected happened. In the Veltar systems, the empty-eyed aliens began to stir. The human broadcasts were somehow reaching them through the quantum consciousness field. Memories of defiance were awakening something in their suppressed minds. "Commander Kim," came a weak voice over the communication system at Proxima Station. This is former Captain Velthik of the Veltar Defense Fleet. I remember my name." Kim nearly dropped her microphone. "Velthik? You're alive? You're thinking? Your broadcasts? They're breaking through the silence in our minds. We remember ... We remember what it was like to hope." Across the Veltar Empire, similar awakenings began. The crystalline syndicate cities started to sing again, their unique harmonic language. Returning as human determination reached them through the quantum field, the Morvac resumed their ancient war chants, though their voices were weak from disuse. Even the proud Zephyrian collective began to stir from their mental slumber. "It's spreading," Dr. Cho reported to Admiral Kim. "Human consciousness is acting like a catalyst. We're not just resisting the silence, we're reversing its effects on other species. How is that possible? I think the silence works by isolating consciousness, making each mind feel alone and hopeless. But humans refuse to be isolated. We reach out, we share our experiences, we connect with others even in the worst circumstances. Admiral Kim watched the displays showing the battle across the galaxy. Human ships were broadcasting their defiance on every frequency, and those broadcasts were awakening minds that had been silent for months. So by refusing to be alone, we're teaching others that they're not alone either. Exactly. The silence feeds on despair and isolation. Human hope is poisonous to it. But the silence was not defenseless. It began to concentrate its attack, focusing enormous pressure on the human consciousness network. Several outer colonies went silent despite their resistance. Captain Bay felt his ship shuddering under the mental assault. His crew was fighting hard, but they were only human. They had limits. All ships, this is Bay, I'm going to try something. If it works, keep broadcasting. If it DOES and single quotes D ... remember us. He turned his ship toward the center of the silence's influence and pushed his engines to maximum power. As he flew deeper into the dark zone, he opened all communication channels and began broadcasting everything that made him human. His memories of childhood, playing in the ruins of Old Sol, his first sight of Earth from space, the day he met his wife, the birth of his daughter, his fear when he learned about the silence, his determination to protect his family. This is what you're trying to destroy, he broadcast to the silence. This is what human consciousness looks like. We love, we fear, we hope, we rage. We make mistakes and learn from them. We fall down and get back up. The silence pressed harder, trying to crush his mind. But Bay kept broadcasting. We're messy and chaotic and impossible to predict. We fight when we should surrender and hope when all reason says we should despair. That's what makes us human. His ship began to break apart under the assault, but his message kept transmitting, and we never, ever give up. The ship exploded in a flash of light, but the message continued. Other ships picked up his broadcast and amplified it. Across human space, his words echoed, we never give up. Commander Kim felt tears on her cheeks as she added her voice to the chorus. Seokjin Park, callsign Ghost Rider, never gave up. Pilot Park, still flying his patrol route, responded immediately. Junyoung Bae, who loved his daughter more than life itself, never gave up. Names and stories spread through the human network and beyond. Each tale of human stubbornness seemed to wound the silence, forcing it to retreat step by step. For the first time in 50,000 years, the great silence was being driven back by something it couldn't understand or consume. The human refusal to be silent. Admiral Kyung-Soo Lee watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The impossible was happening. The great silence, which had consumed civilizations for millions of years, was retreating. Admiral, reported Communications Officer Minho Young, we're receiving transmissions from the Veltar homeworld. They're asking for help coordinating their defense networks. The Veltar are thinking again? Yes, sir, and not just them. The Crystalline Syndicate, the Morvac Hegemony, even the Zephyrian Collective, they're all waking up. Dr. Na Young Han pulled up the consciousness field readings on her screen. Admiral, the human resistance is creating a ripple effect. Our quantum broadcasts are reaching the suppressed minds of other species and giving them the strength to fight back. How many species are awakening? All of them, sir. Every civilization the silence consumed is starting to remember who they were. Admiral Lee felt a surge of hope. Can they coordinate with our network? I'm working on it. The problem is that each species thinks differently. We need to create translation protocols for consciousness itself. Captain Siwoo Choi had been leading the fleet broadcasts from his flagship Unyielding. Now he opened a channel to the recovering alien worlds. This is Captain Choi of the Terran Defense Fleet. To all awakening minds, you are not alone. We are broadcasting on all quantum frequencies. Join your voice to ours. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veltar military frequencies came alive with strategic discussions. Crystalline cities began singing their ancient harmonies of defiance. Morvac war leaders roared challenges that had been silent for months. It's working, Dr. Han reported. The collective consciousness of the awakened species is creating interference patterns too complex for the silence to disrupt. But the silence was not finished. It began to change tactics, concentrating its attack into focused beams aimed at the strongest consciousness sources. Earth itself became a primary target. "Sir, we're reading massive quantum disturbances heading directly for our solar system," reported the sensor operator. "The silence is throwing everything it has at us." Admiral Lee felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Earth was the center of the human consciousness network. If it fell, the entire resistance might collapse. "All ships, return to Earth immediately. We're going to make our stand here." But even as human ships raced home, reports came in of other problems. The elder species, the ones who had allied with the silence, were sending fleets to attack the awakening worlds. "They're trying to re-silence the recovered civilizations," Captain Choi reported. "The Galactic Council is using military force to help the silence." "How many ships?" "Thousands. They're hitting every world that started broadcasting again." Admiral Lee made a decision that would have been impossible for any previous generation of humans. All human vessels, new mission, were going to defend every awakening world simultaneously. "Sir, that's impossible. We don't have enough ships." "We don't need ships. We need consciousness. Dr. Han, can we extend our network to cover the entire galaxy?" "Theoretically, yes. But the power requirements would be enormous. We'd need to use every human mind in the network, not just the military ones." "Do it." Dr. Han began the process of expanding the consciousness network. Back on Earth, civilians volunteered to join the mental link. Children in schools, workers in factories, elderly people in retirement homes. All of them added their minds to the growing network of human determination. "Network expansion at 60%, Dr. Han reported. "We're reaching human settlements across the galaxy." "What about the non-human worlds?" "We're trying to establish connection protocols, but their consciousness patterns are so different from ours." That's when Captain Troy had an idea. "Dr. Han, instead of trying to make them think like humans, what if we help them remember how to think like themselves?" "I don't understand." "The silence attacks by making every mind feel isolated and hopeless. But each species has its own way of finding hope. Veltar find it in honor and duty. Crystallans find it in harmony and beauty. Morvac find it in strength and courage. So we broadcast their own cultural values back to them?" "Exactly. We help them remember what made them who they were before the silence took it away." The plan was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. They began broadcasting not just human determination, but carefully crafted messages designed to awaken the unique spirit of each alien species. To the Veltar, they sent memories of ancient honor codes and military traditions. To the Crystallans, they transmitted mathematical harmonies and geometric beauty. To the Morvac, they broadcast tales of legendary battles and heroic sacrifices. The effect was immediate and powerful. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations didn't just wake up. They exploded back to life with all the passion and energy they had possessed before the silence. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from every awakened world," Communications Officer Jung announced. "They're not just defending themselves anymore, they're going on the offensive." The tactical display showed the new reality. Veltar battle fleets, led by commanders who remembered the art of war, were engaging the elder species ships. Crystalline worlds had begun generating harmonic frequencies that disrupted both the silence and its allies. Morvac ground forces were reclaiming planets that had been lost to the mental plague, but the greatest change was in the consciousness field itself. The combined mental energy of dozens of species, all broadcasting their unique forms of defiance, created a quantum storm that the silence couldn't navigate. "It's losing coherence," Dr. Han reported. "The silence exists by imposing order on chaos, by forcing all consciousness into empty patterns, but we're giving it too much chaos to process." "How much chaos?" "Every awakened mind is thinking in its own way, feeling its own emotions, refusing to be silent in its own language. The silence can't suppress all of them at once." Admiral Lee watched as the dark zones on the tactical display began to shrink. For the first time since the crisis began, the silence was losing territory. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council station, Jung reported. It's Ambassador Kong? Kong's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but defiant. Admiral, the elder species are in complete panic. They're calling for immediate surrender to the Silence. What's their offer? They want to shut down all resistance broadcasts and offer up the awakened species as sacrifices. They're saying it's the only way to appease the Silence and restore the natural order. And if we refuse, they'll use every weapon they have to force compliance. Admiral Lee looked at the faces of his crew. They had come so far, awakened so many minds, pushed back an ancient evil that had seemed unstoppable. But now they faced a choice between fighting the entire galaxy or watching billions of newly awakened beings return to empty silence. Tell the Council we have a counteroffer, he said. What's that, sir? They can surrender to us. Kong smiled grimly. I'll pass along the message. As the transmission ended, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The elder species fleets. We're approaching Earth in force, ready to end the human resistance once and for all. All stations, prepare for battle, Admiral Lee ordered. Today we find out if the galaxy is big enough for free minds and ancient cowards. Through the consciousness network, he felt the response of every awakened being in the galaxy. Human determination, Veltar honor, crystalline harmony, Morvac courage, all focused on a single goal: the Silence would not return. The awakened would not be silenced again, and if the elder species wanted to force them back into mental slavery, they would have to fight every free mind in the galaxy. Director Unesio Jang stood in the command center deep beneath Sol, watching displays that showed the final battle for the galaxy's soul. Above them, space burned with weapons fire as the elder species tried to destroy Earth's consciousness network, but the real war was being fought in a realm that had no physical form. Director, the Silence is making one last attempt to break through our defenses, reported Dr. Na Young Han. It's concentrating all its power on the quantum consciousness field around Earth. Can our network hold? It's not just our network anymore. Every awakened species in the galaxy is feeding power into the defense grid. Humans, Veltar, crystallines, Morvac, and dozens of others. The Silence has never faced unified resistance on this scale. Ambassador Hoon Park, recently rescued from the Galactic Council station, watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The elder species fleets are taking heavy losses. The awakened worlds are fighting back harder than anyone expected. Because they remember what they almost lost, Jang replied. Freedom of thought, the right to dream, the ability to hope for something better, those are worth fighting for? The consciousness field readings showed something unprecedented. Instead of the empty patterns the Silence usually created, space around Earth blazed with the combined mental energy of dozens of species, all thinking their own thoughts, all refusing to be silent. Director, I'm reading massive structural failure in the Silence entity, Dr. Han announced. It's fragmenting. The quantum coherence that holds it together is breaking down. Through the network, every awakened mind could feel it happening. The great Silence, which had fed on crushed dreams and abandoned hopes for millions of years, was choking on the concentrated defiance of the galaxy's free peoples. Admiral Unesio Kim commanded the Flame Fleet from her flagship Eternal Defiance. Around her, ships from every awakened species fought side by side against the Elder Race's forces. All vessels concentrate fire on the Council Fleet's command ships, she ordered. If we can break their leadership, their alliance might crumble. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The observers, the ancient species that had survived by hiding their true nature, suddenly appeared in the battle zone. This is Keeper Velthan to all awakened minds, came the transmission. We have hidden in shame for 2 million years. No more, the observer ships, technology beyond anything the galaxy had seen, turned their weapons not on the human fleet, but on the Silence itself. We choose to dream again, Velthan announced. We choose to hope again. We choose to be more than mere survivors. The effect was devastating to the Silence. The observer's mental awakening created feedback loops that tore through the entity's structure like lightning through darkness. Director Zhang felt the moment when everything changed. Through the consciousness network, she sensed the exact instant when the great silence finally broke apart completely. "It's over," Dr. Han whispered. "The silence entity has dispersed. The quantum patterns are returning to normal space." But the battle wasn't finished. The elder species fleets, desperate to restore the old order, continued their attacks on Earth and the awakened worlds. They'd rather destroy us than live in a galaxy where they can't control who gets to think freely. Ambassador Park observed. That's when the final surprise came. From the silent zones that the silence had abandoned, new voices joined the consciousness network. Species that had been consumed in previous cycles, their minds preserved in quantum stasis for tens of thousands of years, began to wake up. "This is impossible," Dr. Han said, staring at her readings. "I'm detecting consciousness patterns from species that should have been extinct for millennia." The silence didn't destroy them, Zhang realized. It stored them, keeping their minds in suspension while it fed on their potential. Now that it's broken apart, they're all waking up at once. The galaxy suddenly became much more crowded. Ancient civilizations, some older than the current elder species, began broadcasting on frequencies that hadn't been used for millions of years. "This is the eternal assembly to all awakened minds," came one transmission. "We were the first to fall too. The silence, 50 million years ago. We remember the time before the cycles of sacrifice began." Another voice joined in. "The star builders greet their fellow dreamers. We have slept long, but we have not forgotten how to create wonders." One by one, dozens of ancient civilizations added their voices to the growing chorus of awakened minds. Each brought knowledge, technology, and perspectives that the current galaxy had never imagined. The elder species found themselves suddenly outnumbered by beings older and wiser than themselves. Their fleets stopped attacking and began retreating to their home systems. "They're requesting terms for surrender," Admiral Kim reported. "They want to negotiate." "What terms?" Director Zhang asked. Ambassador Park smiled grimly. "They want guarantees that they won't be punished for their alliance with the silence." "And what should we tell them?" "That punishment isn't the goal. Change is." The negotiations were brief but comprehensive. The elder species would give up their position as the galaxy's rulers. In exchange, they would be allowed to participate in the new galactic order as equals, not superiors. "The age of sacrificing younger species to ancient fears is over," Ambassador Park announced to the Galactic Council. "From now on, when something threatens the galaxy, we face it together or not at all." Director Zhang established the new consciousness defense network with Earth as its headquarters but nodes on every awakened world. The network's purpose was simple: ensure that no mind would ever be forced into silence. Again, Admiral Kim took command of the Flame Fleet, a multi-species force dedicated to exploring the galaxy and protecting free thought wherever it was threatened. "We'll be the guardians," she explained to her diverse crew. "When the next cosmic threat emerges, and there will be one, we'll meet it with fire instead of surrender." Dr. Han became the first director of consciousness studies, working with scientists from dozens of species to understand how mind and reality connected. Her research would lead to technologies that seemed like magic to previous generations, but the most important changes were cultural. The galaxy learned to speak with many voices instead of one. Instead of seeking stability through control, civilizations began to find strength through diversity. Years later, a young Veltar student approached her human teacher with a question that had been bothering her. "Teacher Park, why didn't your species run when the galaxy turned against them? Why didn't they hide like the observers did?" The human thought for a moment before answering. "Because someone has to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And when words fail, we speak with flame." "What kind of flame?" "The fire of consciousness that refuses to be extinguished. The flame of hope that burns even in darkness. The light of minds that dream of better worlds and refuse to give up until those dreams become real." The student nodded thoughtfully. "And that flame is what saved us all." No, the teacher corrected gently. That flame is what we all carry inside us. Humans just reminded the galaxy how to use it. Above them, ships from 100 different species traveled between the stars, each carrying their own dreams and hopes, and stubborn refusal to accept limits. The great silence had been broken, the cycles of sacrifice ended, and the galaxy had learned to speak with flame instead of fear. The darkness between the stars was no longer empty. It was full of voices, each one declaring in its own way that consciousness, once awakened, would never willingly sleep again. And in the deepest parts of space, where ancient things stirred and cosmic threats still waited, those voices carried a simple message to anything that might be listening. We are awake, we remember, we do not break. The galaxy had learned to dream again, and those dreams burned bright enough to light the way to tomorrow.